Welcome, everybody, to the workshop for Find More Time for Your Business Without Working Longer Hours. And today we're going to discover some powerful strategies that will multiply the value of our working hours. So just a quick introduction to myself. I live in Quebec City and I have two passions. The first is time management and the second is translation, although I'd say they're probably about equal. So I have a certified I am a certified translator and I run a nonprofit translation team. And over the years, I've had to learn to manage my time very cleverly because I spent 10 years in university when I was in my 40s. At the same time, I was teaching part-time at the university, doing my doctorate, doing some freelance translation, running my nonprofit team. And so out of desperation, I have really dug into ways to get more out of my time. And so I was actually feeling pretty overwhelmed until I started approaching my time the exact way that I manage money. And so I found ways that I could stretch an hour just like we tried to stretch a dollar sometimes. And so just to give you an example of how effective these strategies are, as a freelance translator, I was able to raise my productivity each hour, therefore my profitability, without changing the rates that I charge my clients. So I still charge them the same amount, but because I've learned how to work more strategically, I can actually make more per hour. And so I taught these strategies to the translators on my team and to other people as well who are not translators, they're just in business. And their productivity has also increased. And so in the next few minutes, I just want to talk to you about three secrets that I've learned over the years. And I'm calling them the power of one. So I'm going to teach you one tool to keep on your desk, how to save 1 hour a day with a certain habit, and how to make time for your priorities with one practice. So I'm just going to split my screen again so you can see the slides here. Now, when I say that you could stay focused if you keep one tool on your desk, you're probably thinking, oh, it's a to-do list. Well, actually, it's not. I use to-do lists, but I've found another tool that is much more effective, and it's not a to-do list. It's actually a what did I do list. And so I'll explain that more in a minute. But people who start managing money for the first time, one of the very first things they have to do is start tracking exactly where every dollar goes. So that way, not only do they know where their money is going, but there's another thing that happens when they start tracking it. It makes them much more conscious of making wise decisions about how to spend their money. And it's the same with time because time is money. So if you stop and think for a minute, where does my time go? Could you tell me last week exactly where your time went? You know, if you were on vacation, it'd be easy. You could say, oh, I was on vacation for the week. But if you were working on your business, could you tell me exactly how much time you spent on each task? Well, the one tool I found that I need on my desk is a time tracker. Now, people call it different things. They might call it a work log, a time log, but I like the name time tracker. It's just to track where my time goes. And so it's not necessarily journaling, but I just write down when I start a project, I write down the time, and then I write down the time that I finish it. And at the end of the day, I never wonder, what did I do today? I know exactly what I did today, but it has helped me with so many things. First of all, it helps me focus because if I say I worked 8 hours today and I look at my time tracker and I only have 4 hours of work recorded, then I think, well, okay, obviously I got really distracted. And so this time tracker helps me to focus. The other thing it does, it helps me to estimate the time that I need for certain projects. When I have a similar project later, I can go back to this and see approximately how long it's going to take. And so it's also kind of being accountable to yourself. So if you work in your own business or you have a side hustle, for example, you probably don't have a boss standing there saying, are you working or are you getting distracted? So you have to be your own boss. And this time tracker helps you to be accountable to yourself. So if you are not doing something and you're supposed to be working, then you're going to have a blank in your time tracker. And so later you'll look back and say, well, why were there so many blanks? Is it a focus issue or what is it? So your daily time tracker, the result is you're never going to wonder where your time went, and it will help you gain focus and accountability. And it seems like such a small thing, but honestly, it's probably my biggest secret. A lot of people ask me, how do you get so much done? And how do you juggle so many different roles? Well, this is really my big secret. And so I'm telling you my biggest secret right up front. And I'm just kind of introducing you to it because there's a lot more I could tell you about it if we had time, about the ways that I use it specifically. But for now, a time tracker is going to give you that focus and accountability you need. And then the second secret I wanted to share with you is how you can save an hour a day, 1 hour a day with a simple habit. And you might think, oh, well, that's probably a time schedule, right? Well, actually, it's more like a time budget. And so, as I mentioned earlier, my way of managing time changed completely when I started considering my time literally as money. If I don't use it properly, it's not going to give me the return on my investment that I wanted. And so when someone is learning how to budget their money, after they've figured out where it's going by tracking it, the next step is to tell it where it's going to go. You have to tell your money what it's going to do before it just disappears on you. And so it's the same with managing time. You have to tell your time where it's going to go or it will just disappear. Now, I don't know about you, but I always had a tendency to overestimate what I could get done in a week. And so I wouldn't even stop and try to calculate how long each thing would take. I'd just be so optimistic. I think I could get 5 big projects done in 1 week. And what would happen? Of course, they wouldn't get done. Maybe 1 or 2 would. And so now every Sunday, I set up a time budget for the week. I look at the things that I need to do that week, such as deadlines, progress on my projects, or routine tasks that just have to happen on a certain day or a certain time of month. And then I estimate how long I need for each item. Then I prioritize these tasks. And, you know, as I said, we tend to be optimistic. So if they add up to more hours than I have that week, then I have to push them off to the next week if they're not as urgent. The other important thing is I have to leave some margin because you can't fill every minute. There are always unexpected things that will come up. And so I actually budget my time just like I budget my money. I give it a block on my calendar that week, each of these important tasks, just like you would set aside money for the rent or mortgage or for groceries, you'd set aside a certain amount. It's the same idea when we budget our time. We set aside a certain amount. And so we do this weekly time budget. And the result is we're never going to run out of time for our priority goals because we've budgeted ahead of time. We found out how much time we have, estimated how long something will take, and we blocked off that amount of time for it. And it also helps us to gain flexibility in your schedule because when your time is set in blocks like this, if you do it on a calendar on your computer, for example, you can easily move them around. And so an example of that might be you've blocked off 3 hours on Wednesday for a certain project, but you're waiting for information from somebody else and you don't have it yet. And so you could move that over to Thursday and bring the Thursday task onto Wednesday, and you're still going to stay on track for your week because this budget will give you flexibility. It's organized in blocks that you can easily swap out if you need to. And so with money, it's the same thing. We have to be flexible. Sometimes groceries cost a little more than we expected, so we're going to cut back and maybe eating out at restaurants to balance our budget. And it's the same thing with your time budget. You can be flexible with them, and if something takes longer, you might find something else that you can shorten a little bit. So the important thing when you put these blocks on your calendar is that at the end of the week, you don't just forget about them. So when the week rolls over, you've got to move anything that didn't get finished and find another time for it. And so that is the second secret, to have a weekly time budget. And then the third secret is how to make time for your priorities with one practice. And so we've gone from our daily habit of having a time tracker on our desk to our weekly habit of setting a time budget. And now we're going to look at a monthly practice, and it's a time checkup. So it's not just checking to see what progress you've made on your goals. It's actually to see where your time went. And so if you think again about money, you're trying to maybe save up for a big goal like a vacation or buying a house. But if you let smaller unexpected expenses drain your bank account, then the money isn't there for the big thing when you need it. And so you have to protect it. You have to find out, if you have to have a checkup to find out if you've really used your money in the way you were supposed to, and if you've really used your time in the way you were supposed to. And so I don't know about you, but it's happened to me before where I've got through a whole month and I've looked back and I just feel like, I want to spend, say, half my time on this, and it's not happening. There are other things that are stealing that time away. And so in your business, for example, or side hustle, you might feel like you aren't making progress on the goals that are really important to you because unexpected things come up and steal that time that you planned. And so you can solve this with a monthly time checkup. And this is where that daily time tracker comes in handy, because you can look back and you could say, okay, well, I have my business and then maybe I have some volunteer work I do, or I have this, you might have several roles that you fill. And with your time tracker at the end of the month, you can add up exactly how much time you spent in each role, so you know where your time went and whether or not your expectations are realistic. When you do this checkup, then you don't need to underestimate the time needed for routine tasks anymore, because you've got that record. Okay, I have to do my business accounting once a month, and you might have in your head that it only takes a day, but when you do this time checkup, you find out that it actually takes 2 or 3 days. Well, the next time you could be prepared for that. And so you can give it the time that it needs instead of letting it continually throw off your time budget. And so the time checkup helps you also to gain clarity about your priorities. Now, this happened to me the first time I did this time checkup. I thought that I was spending half my time on translation, my nonprofit translation efforts. And when I looked at my time checkup, I wasn't. I was only spending about maybe a third of the time. And so this helped me to start redirecting my time to the things that I said were my priorities. Instead of just saying it, then I was able to redirect my schedule so that it was actually true. And so that's a very quick summary of the highlights of my time budgeting system. And in this short time we've really barely scratched the surface. So I would love to go deeper and show you how to actually implement this in your own business, to show you the secrets and the worksheets that I've developed to help make my time budgeting system work more effectively. And just to give you an example of what it has helped me accomplish, I was able to do my PhD in less than half of the average time using these secrets. And I was also able to cut back my work time. I was working about 66 hours a week, which is too much. And I used these strategies and some others that I have yet to share to cut my working hours back to 44 hours a week without cutting into the results that I needed to have. Also, when I was teaching at university, I was able to cut my preparation time in half by the strategies that I've developed. And as a freelancer, I already mentioned, it helped me to earn more per hour without charging the clients more, because I was able to accomplish things more quickly. So when you can get more out of an hour, your time becomes more valuable. Literally, it's worth more money. And then you have two choices. If your time is more valuable, you can choose to work the same amount of hours, but you'll earn more. Or you can choose to earn the same amount of money and work less. So those are your two choices when your time becomes more valuable. It really gives you a lot of freedom. And so I wanted to tell you about an event I have coming up in less than 2 weeks. It's called Solopreneur Time Budgeting Bootcamp. And what we're going to do from June 3rd to 7th, that's a Monday to a Friday, we're going to meet online for about an hour. We will have teaching for a few minutes and then some Q&A. And the recordings will be available and also some worksheets. I'm going to share with you some worksheets that I have developed. The time tracker that I use, the time budget that I use, the time checkup that I use. And I've put years into developing these, and I would love to share them with you in this boot camp. And so since this is the beta version of the boot camp, there's an introductory price of only $97. But I decided to do something kind of crazy today. For those of you who have taken the time to participate in this webinar, I'm giving you a coupon code, and it's half with an exclamation mark. So half in capitals with an exclamation mark. And what that means is you could attend this time budgeting boot camp for only $48.50. And so what I'm going to do is put the link in the chat if you are interested in signing up. There we go. I'm also going to put the coupon in there so that you've got that. All right. And so the coupon is not something that is posted publicly on the page. That's something that I'm giving you today in the workshop. So when you sign up, make sure that you put that in the coupon box so that you get your 50% off. And so now I wanted to just switch to the page you're going to see there and give you a little idea of what we're going to look at. So let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. Okay. There we go. So during the 5 days of the boot camp, you're going to learn strategies from my Give Yourself a Raise framework. I actually published a book called that. And that's what I call it because that's what happens. Your time becomes more valuable. You're giving yourself a raise. And so on the first day, I'll show you how to set up your workspace so that you can have maximum focus. And on day 2, you will know exactly where your time is going. And so we'll go deeper into this time tracking process, and I'll show you some tips for how to make that work effectively. And day 3, get relief from your overwhelming to-do list. That's something we could all use. And day 4, how to schedule tasks to match your energy levels. Now, this is interesting. I think you're going to enjoy that a lot. And on day 5, we'll talk about how to enjoy being a solopreneur more. And as I mentioned earlier, daily worksheets to help you quickly implement what you've learned. And also the recordings will be available if you're not available at the time. So right now it's scheduled for 9 a.m. Eastern, but that is flexible. Depending on who signs up, we could discuss what might be a more appropriate time. Now, the dates won't change because that is the week that I've been able to block off for this. However, we can change the times if necessary. And so if you're able to stay on Zoom for a few minutes longer, I would love to take some questions. And if you have any specific time challenges in your business or any questions about what we've covered today, you can go ahead and ask those in the chat. And so you can also, if you want to open your mic and come on screen, you could do that, but just be aware that I am recording this. And so it's up to you. And so I see we have one question in the chat. How is this different from other time management courses? That's a good question. There are a lot of time management courses out there, and I've taken a lot of them myself. And so I would say the difference is I have never seen anybody emphasize that you need to track your time. There's a lot about planning it and setting your priorities and things like that. But I've never seen anyone who's solved the question of where did my time go? Well, I started using the time tracker several years ago, and I could tell you for the last 5 years exactly where my time went. what percentage of my time that I spent in certain areas of my business and in my nonprofit work. I know exactly where it went. I never wonder anymore. And that has helped me to redirect things so that I'm using my time more wisely and more efficiently. And so I have a specific method that I use for time tracking, and it interacts with all the other pieces of my time budgeting system, and it has really been powerful. So in the boot camp, we'll be digging more into that. And really, I found that that's the missing piece in a lot of time management courses. Okay, and there's a comment here. I'm in software, and the problem is that tasks don't repeat in predictable ways, and they rarely fit into hours. So yes, this is something I've worked on a lot over the years, is trying to estimate how long something is going to take. And so a short-term solution is to guess, and then I would say double it so that if it takes twice as long, then you have some flexibility there. The other thing you could do is that when you set up your time budget for the week, don't fill the week with things that absolutely have to be done that week. Put a few in that you could possibly switch to the week after if you had to. And so over time, the long-term solution is to start working farther ahead of your deadlines. And also, when you have some data you've gathered from your time tracking, it's going to help you estimate things quicker. But I understand that with software, that can be a really tricky thing. Sometimes you run into a problem and you try to solve it, and you think it will be a 2-minute fix, and it might end up taking 2 hours. And it's just because you're not familiar with the software enough sometimes. And so there are tutorials that help. And I found one of the tricks there is making sure that when you find an answer online, that it's for the same version of the software or the same version of Windows that you're using, because I've spent an hour sometimes following the instructions, wondering why they didn't work, and finding out that it was a different version of the software. And I see another question. What if I don't have a specific workspace? Would this still work for me? I'm a full-time mom by day, so I move around a lot and squeeze in work hours whenever and wherever I can. I can relate to that. So my 3 sons are adults now, but we had some interesting years when they were little. So I used to keep a workspace in the kitchen. It was just a tiny little desk tucked in the corner. And when I had a little bit of free time, I would go work on it. And I think here that time budget is what's going to be key here, that flexibility. If you could set it up on a calendar in blocks that you can drag around and move where you need to. And so let's say you have something scheduled for 10 o'clock tomorrow, that you're going to spend an hour working on something, and then something comes up with the kids and you can't do it. Then you try to drag it to another time, or unexpectedly, you have some free time. And so you can move something into that slot instead of hoping you'll have time for it tomorrow. So I think that would be helpful for you. And maybe you could sort of set up a portable workspace if you can't actually have a desk somewhere. There are some really neat options now. I won't get into that too much, but even a bin that you had your computer and everything you need, that you could just set up anywhere with it, just trying to be flexible. I'm just going to look at another question here. The second problem I have is that processing the time tracking data is time consuming. I'm glad you mentioned that, because in the boot camp, what I'm going to be sharing with you is when I say worksheets, they're actually more like Excel spreadsheets that will help you, that will actually do some of the calculations for you. And so I've worked many years on refining these, and I find it really helpful. And so that's going to help you in that area. Another comment here. I tried to time track a while ago. It's a good feeling to know at the end of the day where we invested our time. Yes, it is. I keep a daily journal, and I used to find that having a blank page, and I would never write anything. So now I use a journal with prompts. And one of them says, I have it right here, what happened yesterday? And honestly, if you're really busy, it's hard to remember, but I just flip over to my time tracker from the day before, and then I can say, this is what I did yesterday, because the next question is, what were my biggest wins? You know, sometimes we accomplish something really amazing and then we don't take time to celebrate it. But this has helped me to look back and say, oh yeah, yesterday, look what I got done. And so, you know, at first it might feel kind of weird writing down what you're doing, but you know, I've only given you 2 or 3 results from it, but I have found that there's so many amazing things that happen from doing that. And it's a habit that you get used to pretty quickly. And the reason I do it on paper, I say it's a tool to keep on your desk. I just found that it's faster to jot it down quickly, and then later you could transfer it into a spreadsheet. One thing I tried last week was a time planner and the reality in 2 columns by day. Oh, that's a neat approach. So you've got your schedule and then you've got what actually happened. So, and I would say there's never a day that goes exactly the way I planned it. And that's why I've tried to build flexibility into this. I think that's really important. And then there's a question here. Does this program use Asana at all or teach us how to use it? I've heard good things about this and have wanted to implement it. I haven't actually tried Asana myself. I'm interested in checking that out. The focus of this boot camp is actually to show you how to start treating your time as money. Because if you're in business as a solopreneur, or, you know, even if you have a side hustle, your time really is money. And even if you use your time to volunteer and you're not getting paid for it, you still have a limited amount. You can only work a certain amount of hours a week without burning out. And so this will help you in any of those situations to learn how to use your time as if it were money, to treat it as if it's precious, to strategically plan it and budget it and track it, and then periodically do a checkup to see how you're using it and start redirecting it more towards your priorities. And I see a comment here about rescue time. I have heard about that too. And I haven't looked at it yet. So I kind of developed my own method over the years. And so that's what I'll be sharing with you. I could just call it time budgeting because, you know, as a translator, I often go to the thesaurus if I want to use a different word for variety. And there's not really any other word for budget. And this is how this works. It's really about time budgeting. And so that's what we'll be looking at in the boot camp. So are there any other questions? I know a lot of people talk about how they have trouble focusing, and that could be because of feeling distracted, or it could actually be in their environment. There are people who distract them. And so one of the things I've found with these tools that I've developed, that they do help me to achieve optimal focus. And they give me a way to deal with internal distractions and also external distractions. And then someone's asking, how long will the coupon be good for? It's going to be valid up till the day before we start, so up till June 2nd. And then we have another question. What if I'm bad at money budgeting? Well, budgeting is a skill that you can learn. And so I honestly think that as we work through this time budgeting process, it's probably going to help you with budgeting money as well, because the concepts are identical. And so I think that it's a skill that you can learn. And, you know, when I wanted to become a translator, they told me that I couldn't translate into French because I was English. They said I would have to translate from French to English. And my logic skills kicked in and said, well, I think you can be as good in a language as the time that you put into it. And so if I'm willing to put a lot of time into learning French, then I can be good at it. It just made sense to me. And so I think it's this, and it has happened. I'm now a certified translator, French, English, and English, French. I'm certified both ways. So I've passed the quality assessment by the Order of Translators here in Quebec for both directions. And so they were wrong. I could learn to translate into French because I was willing to put a lot of time into it. And so, and yes, I started that process when we moved to Quebec so that I could be in the environment where I could learn more about it. And so if we drew some parallels here, if you want to get better at budgeting, it's just a question of how much time you're willing to put into learning it. And you want to put yourself in that environment. So you'd be watching videos about budgeting, you'd be taking in lots of material and just getting yourself in that environment like we do with language. And it's the same with time budgeting. You can develop the skill if you're willing to put the time in and get yourself in that environment where you're having materials that you're absorbing that are helping you to think differently. But thank you so much for coming today.